I watched my stepsister Maya practice her answers in the mirror, wearing the blazer I'd bought with my last paycheck, rehearsing the responses I'd spent weeks perfecting. She didn't know I could hear her through the thin walls of our family's cramped apartment. She didn't know that in my previous life she'd stolen this exact interview, landed the job at Meridian Tech, and used it as a springboard to become VP of marketing while I rotted in entry-level positions for a decade. But most importantly, she didn't know I'd been reborn with every painful memory intact. "Tell me about a time you overcame adversity," she recited to her reflection, and I felt my jaw clench. Those were my words, my story. The interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning, the one I'd spent 3 months preparing for after graduating top of my class. The one that would change everything. In my first life, I never knew how she'd gotten my interview slot. I thought it was a scheduling error when I showed up and they told me the position had been filled. I'd cried in my car for an hour, then gone home to find Maya celebrating her surprise interview that she'd randomly been called in for. My stepmother Patricia had popped champagne. My father had beamed with pride, and I'd smiled and congratulated her like the doormat I'd been trained to be. Not this time. This time, I knew exactly what would happen. Maya had hacked my email using the laptop I'd foolishly let her borrow, found the interview confirmation, and created a fake cancellation notice to send to Meridian Tech from my account. Then she'd called them pretending to be me, saying I was no longer interested but recommending my sister, Maya Chen, as an even better candidate. She'd studied my resume, memorized my achievements, and walked into that interview room wearing my accomplishments like a costume. And it had worked. She'd launched a career on my stolen opportunity while I'd struggled for years. Always one step behind, always wondering why I couldn't catch a break. But I had died. Actually died. In my first life. At 33, overworked and undervalued, I'd collapsed at my desk from an undiagnosed heart condition. My last coherent thought had been a desperate, burning wish. If I could do it all over again, I would never let them win. Then I'd woken up in my 22-year-old body 3 days before graduation, with 23 years of memories burned into my skull like a warning. The abuse hadn't started with the stolen interview. It had started 12 years earlier when my father remarried Patricia, a calculating woman with a daughter exactly my age. Within months, I'd gone from being daddy's little girl to the unwanted burden. Patricia was a master manipulator. She never hit me, never screamed, just slowly poisoned my father against me with whispered comments and manufactured situations that made me look difficult, ungrateful, spoiled. Emma's so selfish keeping all those nice clothes when Maya has so little. Emma threw a fit about sharing her room. I don't know where she learned to be so territorial. Emma's grades are fine, but Maya tries so much harder. Shouldn't we reward effort over natural ability? My father, desperate to make his new marriage work and blinded by Patricia's doe-eyed manipulation, had believed every word. By the time I was 16, I was the family scapegoat. Maya got the bigger room, the nicer clothes, the money for extracurriculars. I got lectures about entitlement and responsibility. When I got into a prestigious university on a full academic scholarship, my father's response was, "Well, at least you won't cost us anything." They hadn't come to my graduation. They'd gone to Maya's dance recital instead. Maya, who was attending community college part-time and working at a nail salon. Patricia had convinced my father that Maya needed the support more because she was struggling to find her path while I was already so accomplished and independent. I'd cried myself to sleep that night, completely alone. In my previous life, the abuse had escalated after Maya stole my interview. Emboldened by her success and my continued defeat, she'd stolen 2 more job opportunities, a boyfriend, and eventually the credit for a major marketing campaign I'd developed. When I'd finally tried to stand up for myself at a family dinner, Patricia had triggered a full meltdown, crying that I was jealous and hateful, and my father had asked me to leave and come back when I could be happy for my sister. I'd left and barely spoken to them for years, which they'd framed to everyone as me being difficult and estranged. When I died, they hadn't even come to the hospital. I died alone, with a coworker I barely knew holding my hand. But now I was back. And this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. The morning of the interview, I woke up early and made a show of getting ready, putting on my best suit, styling my hair. Maya watched me from the kitchen with barely concealed smugness. "Big day?" she asked, sipping coffee from my favorite mug. Another small theft I'd learned to ignore. "The biggest," I said cheerfully. "This interview could change my whole life." "I'm sure you'll do great," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're so smart, Emma. Way smarter than me." You have no idea, I thought. I left the apartment right on schedule, as if heading to Meridian Tech's downtown office. But I didn't go there. Instead, I went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and waited. At 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email notification. The fake cancellation notice Maya had sent from my hacked account. I'd been expecting it. In fact, I'd helped it along by leaving my laptop unlocked and the interview confirmation email prominently displayed the night before. At 9:30 a.m., I called Meridian Tech's HR department from a different number. "Hi, this is Emma Richardson. I have an interview scheduled for 10 a.m., and I just received a very strange cancellation email that I definitely didn't send. I think my account may have been compromised." The HR coordinator sounded confused. "Oh, we actually just got a call from someone claiming to be you, recommending a Maya Chen instead. Is that not—" "Maya Chen is my stepsister who has access to my laptop and my email password," I said calmly. "I did not cancel this interview. I did not recommend anyone else, and I would never compromise my professional reputation like this. I think she may be impersonating me. Is she there now?" There was a long pause. "She's in the lobby, yes." "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Please don't start the interview without me. This is identity fraud, and I'm prepared to involve the police if necessary." I hung up and headed downtown, my heart pounding with savage satisfaction. In my previous life, I'd been too shocked and passive to fight back. This time, I knew exactly what weapons I had. When I walked into Meridian Tech's gleaming lobby, Maya was sitting in a leather chair, my printed resume in her hands, probably doing last-minute cramming on my achievements. She looked up and saw me, and the color drained from her face. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "I work here," I said coldly. Then I walked past her to the reception desk, where the HR coordinator was waiting with security. What Maya didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that in my previous life, I'd spent a decade at Meridian Tech after finally getting hired through a different department. I'd worked my way up slowly, painfully, always passed over for promotions that went to flashier candidates like the version of Maya who'd stolen my first interview. I'd learned everything about the company, its culture, its people, its hidden opportunities. And I knew that the real power player at Meridian Tech wasn't in HR or marketing. It was Richard Meridian himself, the 68-year-old founder who still came to the office 3 days a week and had a soft spot for brilliant, hardworking underdogs because he'd been one himself. In my previous life, I'd met him once, briefly, in an elevator. We'd chatted about an article on consumer psychology I'd left on my desk that he'd noticed when walking by. It was a 2-minute conversation that had meant nothing. This time, I'd engineered a meeting 3 weeks ago by accidentally bumping into him at his favorite coffee shop, the same one where I'd been waiting this morning. I'd been carrying a stack of books on behavioral economics and marketing psychology. We'd struck up a conversation. He'd been impressed by my insights. We'd met twice more for coffee to discuss industry trends. I'd never mentioned that I was interviewing at his company. I'd just planted seeds, building a relationship with someone who could actually change my trajectory. Now, as security reviewed the fake cancellation email and Maya's phone records showed her call to HR impersonating me, I pulled out my phone and sent Richard a carefully worded message. "Mr. Meridian, I hate to bother you, but I'm in a difficult situation at your office. I had an interview scheduled this morning for the marketing analyst position, and it appears my stepsister tried to steal my interview slot by hacking my email and impersonating me. Security is involved. I'm so embarrassed that my family drama has reached your company's doorstep. I completely understand if you'd prefer to withdraw the interview opportunity entirely." His response came within 3 minutes. Stay right there. I'm coming down. Maya was crying now, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that she thought I'd really canceled, that she was just trying to help. But the evidence was damning. Her phone, my hacked email, the timeline of the fake cancellation sent right before her call to HR. When Richard stepped off the elevator and saw me, his stern expression softened. Emma, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Maya's jaw dropped. You know each other? We've been discussing marketing theory over coffee for the past few weeks, Richard said mildly. Emma's one of the sharpest young minds I've encountered in years, which is why I was personally reviewing applications for this position and specifically asked HR to schedule her interview today. He turned to Maya with cold eyes. And you are? Maya stammered something incoherent. Patricia would have had a smooth lie ready, but Maya had always relied on other people's credibility, not her own intelligence. This interview is obviously canceled, Richard said to the HR coordinator. For both candidates. However, Emma, I'd like you to come upstairs with me. I think we should discuss a different opportunity. 2 hours later, I walked out of Meridian Tech with a job offer that hadn't existed when I walked in. Richard had created a new position, special assistant to the CEO, a role that would give me direct access to every department, mentorship from him personally, and a salary 3 times what the marketing analyst position paid. It was a golden ticket that typically took people 15 years to achieve. You remind me of myself at your age, Richard had said. Brilliant, hardworking, and surrounded by people who wanted to keep you small. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen to you. I'd accepted on the spot. When I got home that evening, the apartment was in chaos. Maya was hysterical, claiming I'd sabotaged her, ruined her life, gotten her arrested. Patricia was in full manipulation mode, and my father was pacing and yelling. How could you do this to your sister? He demanded when I walked in. Getting her dragged out by security? Having her investigated for fraud? I didn't have her investigated, I said calmly, setting down my bag. She committed fraud. She hacked my email, canceled my interview, and impersonated me to steal my opportunity. That's a crime. Security was just doing their job. It was a misunderstanding, Patricia shrieked. Maya thought you'd backed out. She was trying to help the family by salvaging the opportunity. By studying my resume and pretending to be me? I raised an eyebrow. Come on, Patricia. Even you aren't good enough to sell that lie. My father's face turned purple. Don't speak to your stepmother that way. Or what? I asked. And for the first time in my life, I felt no fear. You'll ignore me harder? Prioritize Maya more? You've already given me nothing. You have no leverage. We've given you everything, Patricia hissed. A home, food, education. You gave me the legal minimum required by law after Dad married you, I interrupted. And even then, only what you couldn't reallocate to Maya. The food was leftovers. The home was the smallest room and then half of Maya's room. The education was what I earned myself through scholarships you tried to convince me not to accept because it would be showing off. My father looked stricken. For a moment, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, a crack in Patricia's carefully constructed narrative. I got a job today, I continued. A very good job. I start Monday at Meridian Tech as special assistant to the CEO, reporting directly to Richard Meridian himself. I'll be making enough to move out within a month. The room went silent. How? My father started. Turns out that when you don't have your opportunities stolen, things work out, I said pleasantly. Now I'm going to pack. I've already reached out to a friend about staying with her until I can afford my own place. Maya, stay out of my room. Patricia, we both know what you are, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Dad, I hope someday you'll realize what you chose. I didn't wait for a response. I went to my room, packed my essentials, and left that night. The first month at Meridian Tech was intense. Richard wasn't just a mentor, he was a strategic genius who'd built a billion-dollar company from nothing. He taught me everything, not just about marketing and business, but about reading people, identifying opportunities, and building power. Maya didn't beat you with talent in your other timeline, he said one evening when I'd confided in him about my family dynamics, carefully editing out the rebirth part. She beat you because she was willing to be ruthless and you were trained to be accommodating. That's changing now? He was right. Under his guidance, I wasn't just learning the business. I was transforming into someone formidable. 3 months into my job, I'd already restructured the marketing department's approach to consumer engagement, led a campaign that increased customer retention by 18%, and impressed every executive in the company. Richard started bringing me to board meetings. Other departments requested my input. I was becoming indispensable. And Maya? She'd found work at a small startup doing social media management. According to the occasional guilt-trippy text from my father, she was struggling. Patricia was blaming me for destroying her confidence. I felt no sympathy. In my previous life, Maya had built her entire VP career on my stolen interview and my plagiarized ideas. She'd been a mediocre talent coasting on fraud. Now she was facing the real world with her actual abilities, and it turned out they weren't much. 6 months after starting at Meridian Tech, Richard called me into his office with an unusual request. "We're acquiring a startup," he said. "Small company, about 30 employees, doing interesting work in influencer marketing. I want you to lead the integration as VP of Digital Strategy. It'll be your first major leadership role." VP. At 23. In my previous life, I'd never made it past senior manager, even after a decade. "What's the company?" I asked. He slid a folder across the desk. "Luminara Digital. They've got good bones but poor management. I think you can turn it around." I opened the folder and froze. Luminara Digital. I knew that name. In my previous life, Maya had left Meridian Tech after 3 years to become VP of marketing at Luminara Digital. She'd run it for 5 years before the company collapsed due to financial mismanagement and several scandals involving inflated metrics and fraudulent client reports. "I know that look," Richard said. "What is it?" "I need to research them more carefully," I said slowly. "I've heard some concerning things about their business practices." What I found over the next week of investigation was even worse than I'd remembered. Luminara's CEO, Trevor Kane, was a charismatic fraudster who'd been cooking the books and lying to clients for years. In my previous timeline, Maya had either been complicit or willfully ignorant, and the whole house of cards had collapsed in a spectacular fashion that made national news. Several executives had gone to prison. But it hadn't happened yet. In this timeline, Luminara was still in its growth phase, 6 months away from the deals that would later be exposed as fraudulent. I reported everything to Richard: the financial irregularities, the suspicious client contracts, the red flags in their reported metrics. "Good catch," Richard said grimly. "We'll adjust the acquisition. I'm bringing in forensic accountants and we're going to gut the executive team. I want you to rebuild the company from the ground up. Keep the good employees, fire anyone who's compromised, and establish real practices. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. The acquisition went through with heavy modifications. Trevor Kane was fired before the deal closed when the forensic accountants found evidence of fraud. 3 other executives were let go. The company was restructured as a subsidiary of Meridian Tech, and I was installed as VP and general manager at age 23. It was in the news. Business journals wrote articles about Richard Meridian's prodigy protege, who was revolutionizing digital marketing. My face was in Forbes, Business Insider, TechCrunch, and Maya saw all of it. She called me for the first time in 6 months, her voice tight. "Congratulations on the VP position." "Thank you," I said coolly. That's quite an achievement. I'm happy for you." She didn't sound happy. She sounded hollowed out. "Was there something you needed, Maya?" She hesitated. "I'm actually calling because I saw that Luminara is hiring for several positions. I was thinking of applying for the senior marketing manager role. I thought maybe, since you're in charge now, you could put in a good word. The absolute audacity of it. In another life, she'd held the position I now had. She'd stolen my opportunity and built a career on my back. Now she wanted me to help her? Send your resume to our HR department, I said. It'll be reviewed along with all the other applications. Emma, please, I know things ended badly with the Meridian Tech thing, but that was a misunderstanding. I'm really struggling here. This job would change everything for me. Can't you just... No, I said simply. You're not entitled to my help, Maya. You're not entitled to anything from me. If you're qualified, you'll get an interview. If you're not, you won't. That's how the real world works. She started crying. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the interview thing. I was young and stupid. And Patricia convinced me it was okay, and I've learned from it. Please, I need this. You need this, I repeated. Just like I needed that interview you stole. Just like I needed a family that didn't treat me like garbage. Just like I needed a father who didn't choose his new wife over his daughter. You didn't care about any of that. I was a kid. You were 22 years old, the same age I was, old enough to know right from wrong. I kept my voice level, emotionless. Send your resume to HR. That's all I'm willing to offer. I hung up. Her resume arrived 2 days later. It was unimpressive. Community college degree, 3 years of scattered social media experience, no major achievements or metrics. She'd puffed it up with vague language and exaggerated responsibilities, but anyone with experience could see through it. Still, I had HR bring her in for an interview. Not because I wanted to help her, but because I wanted her to see what she'd thrown away. The day of her interview, I didn't meet with her personally. I had my director of marketing conduct the initial screening while I watched through the one-way glass we used for training observations. Maya looked older than her 25 years. Tired, defeated. She wore a cheap suit that didn't fit quite right and answered questions with the desperate energy of someone who knew they were drowning. Tell me about a successful campaign you've led, my director of marketing asked. Maya launched into a story that I recognized because it was one of the campaigns I'd developed in my previous life that she'd stolen credit for. But she only knew the surface details, not the strategy behind it, and when pressed on the methodology and results, she fell apart. She didn't get the job. The rejection email went out that afternoon. She called me immediately, sobbing. Please, Emma, please, I need this. I'll do anything. I can't keep living like this, working dead-end jobs, barely making rent. You have everything now. Can't you just give me this one chance? I earned everything I have, I said. Every single bit of it. You could do the same if you were willing to put in the actual work instead of looking for shortcuts. I'm trying, she wailed. I'm trying so hard and nothing works. It's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not fair. It wasn't fair when you stole my interview. It wasn't fair when Patricia turned my father against me. It wasn't fair when I had to watch you succeed, using my accomplishments while I struggled. But I didn't give up. I didn't expect anyone to hand me success. I earned it. I can't do what you do, she whispered. I'm not as smart as you. I'm not as talented. I need help. Then find someone else to help you, I said, because I'm done being your victim. I hung up and blocked her number, but that wasn't the end of it. Patricia called next, then my father, both demanding that I hire Maya, insisting it was my family duty, claiming I was being cruel and vindictive. You're punishing her for one mistake she made years ago, my father said. When are you going to let this go and be the bigger person? I am being the bigger person, I replied. I'm letting the legal system handle the fraud charges instead of pressing them myself. What fraud charges? He sputtered. The ones from when she hacked my email and impersonated me. Meridian Tech's legal team has been sitting on the evidence for months. I've been the one keeping them from prosecuting. But if you and Patricia don't stop harassing me and my company, I'll stop protecting her. That shut them up for a while. Meanwhile, my career continued to soar. Under my leadership, Luminara Digital became Meridian's most profitable subsidiary within a year. I implemented ethical practices, built an incredible team, and created campaigns that won industry awards. Richard promoted me to Senior Vice President of Digital Innovation and gave me equity in the company. At 25, I was a millionaire. At 27, I was being headhunted by Fortune 500 companies offering astronomical salaries. At 29, I was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 and gave a keynote speech at a major marketing conference. I bought a penthouse apartment in the city. I traveled internationally for business and pleasure. I dated successful, respectful partners who treated me well. I built a life that was everything I'd been denied in my previous existence. And my family? They fell apart exactly as they deserved, without Maya's stolen success to fund their lifestyle, because in this timeline, she'd never gotten that foothold at Meridian Tech. Patricia and my father struggled financially. My father's small business had always been barely profitable, propped up by Patricia's schemes and Maya's eventual high salary in my previous life. This time, there was no Maya VP salary to lean on. The business failed within 3 years. They had to sell their house and move into a small apartment. Patricia's mask started to slip as stress mounted, and my father finally began to see her manipulation tactics for what they were. They divorced when I was 28. My father reached out to me then, full of apologies and regrets, asking if we could rebuild our relationship. I met him for coffee once. He looked old, worn down, full of remorse. "I failed you," he said, tears in his eyes. "I was so desperate to make my marriage work that I let Patricia poison my mind against my own daughter. I'm so sorry, Emma. Can you forgive me?" I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd raised me alone for 10 years after my mother's death, who'd been a good father until he'd chosen a manipulative woman over his child. "I forgive you," I said finally. "But I don't want a relationship with you. You made your choices. You prioritized your comfort and your marriage over your daughter for over a decade. I've built a life without you, and I'm happy. I don't have room in it for people who've hurt me, even if they regret it now. Please," he whispered. "You're all I have left." "You had me," I said gently but firmly. "You had a brilliant, loving daughter who would have done anything for your approval. But you chose Patricia instead. And now you have the consequences of that choice. I hope you find peace, Dad. I really do. But it won't be with me." I left him there and never looked back. Maya's trajectory was even more dramatic. Without the foundation of stolen success, she struggled for years in low-level positions. She got fired from multiple jobs for poor performance and attitude problems. The same problems she'd always had, but that had been masked by Patricia's protection and my stolen credentials. When she was 28, she got caught plagiarizing content for a client while working at a small agency. She was fired and blacklisted in the industry. She tried to start her own consulting business, but without any real skills or accomplishments, it failed within 6 months. The last I heard, she was working retail and living with Patricia in a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. I encountered her once, completely by accident, when I was 31. I was leaving a restaurant after a business dinner when I saw her through the window of a discount clothing store folding shirts and helping customers. She looked exhausted, older than her years, completely defeated. She saw me, too. Our eyes met through the glass. For a moment, everything hung suspended. All the years of abuse, theft, and injustice crystallized in that single glance. She looked away first, her face crumpling with shame. I didn't go inside. There was nothing to say. The universe had already said it for me. This was justice. 3 years later, I was recruited to become Chief Marketing Officer of Meridian Tech after Richard retired. At 34, I was one of the youngest C-suite executives in the industry. I'd more than tripled my wealth through equity and investments. I'd spoken at conferences worldwide, published articles in top business journals, and been featured in multiple documentaries about innovative marketing strategies. I'd built the life I should have had the first time around, the life that Maya and Patricia had stolen and that I'd been too weak to fight for. But I wasn't weak anymore. I'd learned that the world didn't reward fairness or kindness or patience. It rewarded power, strategy, and the willingness to fight for what you deserved. On my 35th birthday, Richard threw me a party at his estate. The guest list included CEOs, venture capitalists, and industry leaders. As I stood on his terrace overlooking the city, champagne in hand, surrounded by successful, genuine friends I'd cultivated over the years, I felt something I'd never felt in my previous life. Complete peace. I'd won. Not just against Maya and Patricia, but against every force that had tried to keep me small and defeated. I'd taken the unfair advantage of rebirth and used it not just to avoid my mistakes, but to build something magnificent. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "I saw your promotion announcement. Congratulations. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You were always the strong one. Maya." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She didn't get to be proud of me. She didn't get to claim any piece of my success or act like she'd played some role in making me stronger. I'd succeeded despite her, not because of her. The party continued around me, full of laughter and celebration. Richard found me on the terrace and raised his glass. "To Emma Richardson," he said, "the most formidable talent I've ever had the privilege of mentoring. Here's to the next decade being even more spectacular than the last." "To the next decade," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As I looked out over the glittering city lights, I thought about my previous life, about dying alone at 33, unmourned and undervalued, with nothing but regrets and what-ifs. That Emma would never have believed that this was possible, that you could take back your power, that you could win. But I'd learned the hard way, the universe doesn't give you second chances. I'd gotten one anyway, through some miracle or cosmic accident, and I'd seized it with everything I had. I'd let Maya steal my interview in this life, knowing exactly what she was doing because I'd had a better plan. I'd let her think she'd won so she'd show her true colors in a documented, undeniable way. I'd used her betrayal to launch myself even higher than I would have with that original interview. And now, while she folded discount t-shirts for minimum wage, I ran a department at a multi-billion-dollar company and lived a life beyond anything she could have imagined. Some people might call it revenge. I called it justice. The party stretched late into the night, full of music and joy and possibility. I danced, I laughed, I made deals and forged connections that would shape the next phase of my career. I was surrounded by people who valued me, respected me, and saw my worth. At 2 a.m, as the last guests filtered out and I stood alone on the terrace one final time, I pulled out my phone and looked at Maya's deleted message one more time in the trash folder. "I was always the strong one," I murmured to the empty air. "You just took longer to realize it." Then I permanently deleted the message, blocked the number, and went home to my penthouse. My perfect life, my hard-won triumph. I'd been reborn with memories of suffering and defeat. I'd used those memories to build something unshakable. And I'd proven the most important lesson of all. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And make sure they regret ever underestimating you. In my previous life, I'd died asking for a second chance. In this life, I'd made damn sure I'd never need a third.